happening right now as we're talking.
Great. So I'll just say the quick introduction that you're talking with a group of students in a graduate educational technology course at the University of Oklahoma in Norman, Oklahoma. There's about 15 students, and their interests include they're already currently teachers, they're studying to be teachers, or they're interested in supporting teachers in using technology. They've all read your book before this, and they've sent you questions ahead of time. And I'll just leave it at that.
Very good. Well, thank you, and thanks for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and answer your questions. And I took a look at the Google Doc that you've started to add your questions to, and some good questions there, not only about personalized PD, but also about flipped class in general. Maybe we could ask that question of you first of all. What kind of experience do you have or knowledge do you have of flipping professional development or flipping the classroom or anything like that? What do you have already? Are you just starting to look at that concept or that way of teaching and learning, or is that something that you're pretty familiar with?
So it's something that they'll, since this is a 4-weekend class, there'll be some flipped learning that occurs in between. But last time I taught this class, we focused on flipped learning, and it was kind of a bust, honestly, because the emphasis became about the flipping and not about the learning. And so we were actually looking for a different book to use that's more focused on the learning than on the flipping, even though your questions kind of focus more on the flipping, which we'll talk more about. But the idea is that it's all about learning in different ways and learning in how you need and making the most of your professional development opportunities.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, and I think that is not all that uncommon. That's quite a familiar theme, that when people talk about flipping and they talk about a different style of learning, whether they call it flipped class or flipped learning or whatever the other names are, they talk about the video. And those of us who flip our classes really very quickly determine that it's not about the video. The video is a tool, and just like the textbook, or do something out of class and then bring your introductory perfunctory knowledge to class and we'll apply it. I'm a social studies teacher. I teach AP government and a civics course called American Issues. That's a regular ed course with about 32 students in the classroom. And as a social studies teacher, we kind of say, well, we've been flipping for hundreds of years, right? Here's the textbook, go home and read it. Tomorrow we're going to talk about it and try to do some type of a simulation or activity or application in some way. And I think that's, that learning process that happens in class, or that learning process that happens for the teacher, if you're talking about flipped PD, the important thing is what happens in that group space. So if you think of the individual space where you can do this anywhere in the world, you could do it a video, at home, reading at home. You could do it on the bus. You could do it waiting to pick up a kid from soccer practice. That individual space stuff that can be done anywhere. Well, that's that introductory thing that can be done outside of the class when you're all alone. But it's the group space. That's where the flipped learning and the personalized PD and the flipped PD really become powerful, because now you've sort of freed up the time to do all the things that you've always wanted to do. Again, the simulation, the activity, the gamified opportunities, whatever it is, the real higher level thinking. Bloom's taxonomy, the new Bloom's taxonomy, where you're creating something and before that evaluating and applying. So that's sort of the quick introduction to that thought process. And so you go, well, wait a minute, it's not about the video. The video is one of those tools that gets us the opportunity for the group space to do the things that we can only do together in the group. We can't have this discussion. We can't do this, simulation of, fill in the blank alone, because we need these other people to do it, but we've freed up the time to do it. Same thing with personalized PD is, what can be done in the individual space so that we can flip that, watch this video, read this memo, take a look at this email when we show up together at the staff meeting or on the day of the PD event that we're doing or whatever it is. That's when we're going to take this and apply it. So that's sort of where we are. I'm sort of trying to live in two worlds for you here because we have written that book called Flipping 2.0, and there's a lot of great authors and ideas in there, and that's about in the classroom. And the more recent book that we wrote is called Personalized PD, which you're reading. Thank you, by the way. And we're real proud of that because it started with Flipping 2.0, and Kristen Daniels from Minnesota wrote a chapter about how she does things. And you probably read in my chapter in Personalized PD that, I had never thought about it, but we had PD where people weren't getting what they needed, and there was a better way to do it. And she told us what that was, and we said, oh, we got to explore this. We got to go deeper on this. We got to give people this option because it's such a great idea. And now, I'm the guy who talks about personalized PD, and I just talk for 10 minutes, without answering a question. But let me stop there and see where you want to go next. What do you want to talk about in terms of personalized PD or flipping or whatever else is on your mind?
So I teach second grade and have only done probably a very small amount of professional development. This is my first year. But I was very interested in the part where you talk about professional development as in small groups and kind of what that looks like and how do you touch on what everybody wants to learn about without having, a million different groups talking about a million different things. How do you consolidate that into just a couple of groups while also hitting what everybody else wants to learn?
That's a good question, and it's a common question. And I think there's a couple layers to that, to the best answer to your question. I think, first of all, I don't think we should necessarily be concerned with giving everybody the same thing, right? We should identify what they need and then help them get it. And if we have to go into different directions, then that's okay. And if we can identify groups of people that want to learn the same thing, then we can get them together and they can sort of become this cohort, this learning community where they can work together on it. If you're out there on your own, well, that's okay too. I like to tell the story. I don't know if you know about Robert Fulghum, who wrote the All I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten book. But he tells the story about how he was organizing Sunday school children, and he said, the dwarves go stand over here, and the wizards go stand over here, and there's this little girl tugging on his jacket, and she said, where do the mermaids stand? And so she was a mermaid, and it's okay if everybody else is doing something else. And for your students in your second grade classroom, you need something different. It's okay for you to go and find personalized PD so that you can get what you need for your students. Yes, it would be nice to learn about, literacy. And yes, it would be nice to learn about how to use the smartboard, but maybe you've already got that. You don't need that. What you need is, numeracy for this particular group. You go find that. And that's sort of one of the end processes, I think, of personalized PDs. You're going and getting this for yourself. But to answer your question more directly, how do we do that? I think if we want to put people together in groups, we can ask them the questions. A lot of schools are Google Apps for Education, so we have Google Forms. You can use SurveyMonkey, Socrative, Poll Everywhere. There's a lot of ways to find out what teachers need and what they want, and then we can use that to group them, and then we can give them what they need in that smaller group. So maybe it's a video explaining, well, this is how you use whatever the topic is, or maybe it is, we've got these people who want to sit together and have somebody at their elbow helping them through it. But it's a challenging process, I would say. It's not easy to find out what everybody wants and needs, and it's not easy to set up those groups. And sometimes there isn't a group, and that's okay too. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Do you want to follow up?
Well, I might need a minute.
Okay.
So can I ask a follow-up question on that? And that is, it seems a lot of times in a school that there's one or two people whose eye is really on professional development. And when a school really commits to personalized PD, how do you keep that leader, that person from burning out? Like, how do you share the load, like with maybe brand new teachers, older teachers? Like, how does that, logistically work, or what are some strategies for that?
Did you say at the beginning that there's just a few people who are always responsible for it?
Yeah, it just seems that way, that there's, the people who value professional learning often are dragging others with them. And maybe the question is how do you go more towards a shared ownership model and change the culture of your school in order to value PD?
How do you get people excited about professional development, even though, we've been going to boring professional developments for so long?
Well, exactly. I mean, we've all been there, right? Where we go and we like, really, I have to sit here for an hour and listen to this? I've been doing this for 3 years, I remember one staff development, whatever it was, day, staff meeting, whatever, where I was there and I watched the principal talk about how, the science class was using tables and they had moved them into this, horseshoe pattern. And it was so cool that they were using tables in a horseshoe. And I'm like, okay, I asked for tables 10 years ago and put my desks in a horseshoe. I'm like, come on, give me something new here. But anyway, so I digress. To answer that question, I think you hit the nail on the head. People have been duped before. People have been lied to. People have been treated as if they, never read a book or knew what was going on in the classroom. So you get to the PD and it's boring, it's useless, and it's just not a heck of a lot of fun. And you're not treated as a professional. And so people have been, a little bit beat down and battered up a little bit. And so there is some skepticism, and I don't want to paint a doom and gloom picture, but the other side of that is personalized PD, where we're saying, hey, you know what? You're a professional. You're an educator who knows what she needs, knows your students. We trust you. Now let's help you get what you need, and then let's let you keep going, right? That's the constant progress part of it. And I think, to talk about that in terms of changing the culture, I think administrators are important. I think that the instructional coaches, if you have them, the tech integrators, but it's really about the teacher leaders changing their mindset, or really being allowed to, or sort of empowering themselves to say, hey, look, this is good. I'm finally getting something I need. I'm finally getting something where, it's not about what everybody else needs, but it's about what I need and what these other people who work with me need. So it can become this, this hilarious, wonderful experience of, now I'm not getting this sit in the chair for an hour and, get something I don't need. So I think growth mindset is important. I think that can help change the culture. So the growth mindset is wherever I am is okay. And now I want to move forward. And then once I move forward, what am I going to do next? What am I going to learn next? Who am I going to connect with? How am I going to add to this? And I think that change to a growth mindset leads to a change in culture, where it's more of a, what do we get to do today? What can I go and explore today? What kind of crazy stuff can I come up with, to do for my students? And then the person down the hall and the person in the other direction down the hall looks at that and goes, well, that was really cool. I heard about this that she's doing with her students. I'd like to do something like that, but I don't know how. Let me go ask. And now you have conversations in the hallway. And then you talk about, well, this is where I learned it. Can you present that to us? Sure. How about after school? Great. But then, yeah, are you the only person who's doing it? Maybe for a little bit. You should be compensated for that. You're a professional. If there's no money, there's always time. So you should, be advocating for that time. Maybe you don't have to do bus duty this week because you prepared this presentation and you helped these other teachers, and they're going to pay you back. They can't explain how to, make and edit a video using Camtasia so that we can create something useful for our students, but they can stand outside in the snow and take your bus duty. And now we're growing something. We're building something, right? Hey, I'd like to be involved with that. I want to do this other thing. I read this blog. I have this book. I went to this Twitter chat. I don't even know what Voxer is, but I got in a Voxer group and I'm listening to these smart people around the country talk about things and I want to share it. And so I think it starts with individual teacher leaders having a growth mindset, doing it, trudging through it, doing the hard work, building a culture of learning, and then bringing other people along with them. And if we can get 85% of the people to come along with us, then the other 15% will come along over time, I think.
It looks like Barbara has questions.
I do.
You might need to go a little closer.
Yeah. Hi there.
Hi, Barbara.
I enjoyed your book. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I can very much identify with what you're talking about. My question is, to build on what you were talking about, there are those handful of teachers that are the ones that continually need to lead the charge for professional development. So to get the culture to change, because it looks like it's going to be kind of tough, because a lot of those teachers they're not comfortable leading that or feel that they have anything to teach at this point. My question is, there has to be value as well in just maybe that group getting together, and maybe they don't have an instructional leader or a PD person or somebody who's of mastery, but do you see very often where they can get together and actually figure it out? I mean, hopefully we're bright people that if we want to learn how to do the smart board, we actually have that time to play, so to speak, as you were talking about. Do you see that very often? Because there can't be that many buildings in smaller districts that have that many instructional leaders. So I think that's where I'm struggling a little bit, is how that could be
Sure.
How that could be together.
Well, I think, first of all, I would say if you can make it as comfortable for yourself as possible, I'm assuming, Barbara, that you're one of those, people who we go to all the time. If you can make it as,
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
And about that compensation, yeah.
Ask for that. You should ask for that.
Oklahoma's a little tough.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, what happens is, and I'm sure you've seen this, is if you do go to a conference, there's payback on the other end, where then you have to present with it, which you would want to do, except you're continually doing that. And as you know, preparing, that's a lot of work when it falls on just those few people. So
well, yeah, let's come back to that, because I'm not sure that's always a good idea either. But I say, first of all, make it comfortable for you. So if it's something that you're passionate about, then make that the presentation. If you don't want to prepare, whatever it is, 30 slides and the handouts and the hour-long presentation, then make it a conversation. Make it a workshop. Make it something that's comfortable for you, so that you're not planning everybody else's stuff all the time, at the expense of what you need and not getting the compensation for it. What we decided to do that, and you probably read about it with Fireside PD and Patio PD. I went to the Canadian Flip Conference and was a featured speaker there, and FlipCon in two different, one in Canada north of California and one on the East Coast. And each time I got stuck in the, I can't even say it. It was so traumatic. I got stuck at the airport for 16 to 19 hours and I came back and there's got to be a better way. And we said, well, why don't we just have everybody over at our house? Then I don't have to travel. Then I don't have to go everywhere. It's, I open up the door and everybody comes in and we sit and talk. And so we have from 9 till noon tomorrow, we have Fireside PD. I light the fire and we sit, literally light the fire. And we sit there and we talk. And last time, which was last week, everybody came to my house and I was going to sit there and drink coffee and have a fire anyway. And I had friends to talk to about educational technology and gamification and Google Cardboard and Breakout EDU. It was just this ongoing conversation about, 3 hours of people just talking. So that, sit in your pajamas, do it on Twitter, have a Voxer chat. There's all kinds of options, but I would say make it comfortable for you. And then once you do that, you may notice some people who are trying out the things that you're talking about. And then you've got to go ask them, or, somebody's got to go ask them. It may not be your role. Do it anyway. It may not be, you may not have an instructional coach or a ed tech coach or whatever. Somebody's got to go and say, hey, I noticed you're doing this, whatever you're doing in your classroom. Would you be willing to, talk about that for 20 minutes? Would you be willing to facilitate a discussion? We'll come up with questions and you can just sit there and, answer them, kind of like we're doing right here, right? This is not all that traumatic. Maybe it's, instead of hour-long PowerPoint presentations, we can have something that's more comfortable. Because I know people don't want to present. I shouldn't say that. Not everybody wants to present. Not everybody, again, to your other point, wants to go to a conference and come back and present. Now, not everybody. I had a group of teachers that wanted to teach like a pirate, and they said, "Yeah, we'll do this." In my high school, there had never been a book study before, because everybody's like, "No, you can't make us do that." And now here were teachers who said, we want to do this. And I went and said, hey, can we get books? Can you guys pay for them? And we were told, in my administration, this was years ago now, but and they're different and they're fantastic. But they were told, yeah, fine, we'll get books. But when you're done reading the book, you got to present on the book. And they were out. One person said, hey, look, I graduated from this high school. I'm a first-year teacher. There is no way I'm going to stand in front of my old teachers and tell them how to teach. So not everybody wants to present, and I think that's okay. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe you can write a blog post about it. Maybe, maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you just want to, talk to the people in your department if you have, like we have a social studies department. But my point is, I think overall, is you got to be a leader, and then you've got to build and grow, and it starts with asking. Adults want to talk about stuff. Teachers want to tell what they're doing in their classroom. You got to make them understand that what they're doing is important, and they'll say, well, it's not any better than what anybody else is doing. But a lot of times there's there's two things that we can do or that we can talk about that are. And if we ask, do you think you can ask? Can you think of 3 colleagues that are doing something good in their classroom where you could ask them to share a 20-minute conversation? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think we've done that for quite a while. But, there's, especially with technology, you do need a little bit of a level of expertise at some point, because I think that's where the frustration for a lot of teachers are. So I think it's either, either this is what you want to work on and, you've got to get together, and if you don't have an instructional leader to help you in that particular arena, even having the time to work together, or try out certain apps, as a team or whatever. Because I think you just don't always have the coaching that, you'd like to have, and that many people. So
right.
that's,
well,
You know,
Just to add on to that, I think it's okay if you don't have, that one person. You read about Play Date, whatever their acronym is.
I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
And you can be the organizer, and you can say the only thing I'm going to do is send out this email and tell you when we're meeting and where we're meeting, and then come and let's go, let's figure out this thing together. And then you can help each other, and then it becomes that whole growth mindset. There is no expert. The smartest person in the room is the room, and we're going to do this all together. George Couros says that, innovator's mindset writer.
So one thing I'll add to Barbara, it doesn't always have to be in your building. And so I'll just give you kind of an example. Okay, so as a professor, I get no points or value, or people are like, why are you always going to these ed camps? They always ask me as a professor, what's the point of you going to an ed camp? The ed camp, the reason I go to the ed camp is I'm the only one that's doing technology integration here at OU. Specifically. So maybe Dr. Beach and literacy, she does a lot too, and we play together sometimes. But I go to ed camps and I have a couple teacher friends. There's one that was down at Lawton and a couple other places. And we go to conferences together. And sometimes we're I got this new toy, the Bloxels that we were playing with earlier. That's the first person I messaged. I was like, woo, I got this video game making thing. Let's share, So it doesn't always have to be in your building. And sometimes by going to ed camps and play dates, you can identify other like-minded people, and sometimes it's great to cross-pollinate between districts. And if that's where you feel comfortable that you're not always the one carrying the load, you still have that growth mindset and improve yourself. So I'm not trying to steal your thunder, John, but I hope that we're making them all go to an ed camp. We're having our class at ed camp on March the 5th. And so they're going to get to experience an ed camp as well. So anyway.
That's excellent. What was the name of that video game making thing that you?
Oh, Bloxels.
It's really
Bloxels.
Well, you'll have to send me that later.
Yeah, it's Pixel Press. It's awesome.
All right then. I'm sorry.
I said I'm a Kickstarter addict.
Oh, okay. Mental note. And that's the other thing, what you mentioned there that I was thinking as we were talking as well, that your experts, if you need them, don't have to be in your building. There's a hashtag for whatever it is you want and whatever it is you need. There's a Twitter chat. There's somebody on Twitter who knows the answer. There's Voxer groups that you can set up yourself, or there's Google Hangouts. We haven't done it for a while, but we have a social studies Google Hangout group where we used to get together once a month, but everybody got busy, where we would get together and say, what are you doing in your class? What's the new thing that you're trying? What do you need help with? So a Google Hangout with people that you meet at conferences or meet at ed camps, good way to go. I just got I'm in a couple of Voxer groups, and I just got somebody from Texas asked me yesterday about using Voxer with students. So she's in Texas asking the question, and I give her a 3-minute explanation of how I suggest high school students use Voxer, and they set up a group for themselves to study with and share Quizlet links and things like that. And I want them to get connected with future professors and stuff like that too. So that's a way to do it. I just had somebody from my school asked about embedding her Google Classroom into her Google site, and I didn't know the answer. So I said, tweet at Alice Keeler, who wrote the book on Google Classroom, and see if she knows an answer. So that's the other the other answer to that is if you can't do it together, which I think you probably can, but if you can't, then there are these experts out there, and it's one of the great benefits of having a global professional learning network. You can go ask the people who made the tool. What else should we talk about? By the way, if you're not tweeting well, first of all, you should be using Twitter, right? And you should be growing that PLN. And I think that's part of the focus of what you'll do coming up. But man, there's so much good stuff out there. But a lot of people don't do this. Tweet at the people who make the tools that you're using, right? They are on Twitter.
Like who's your list of top people to follow on Twitter?
You're asking me who you should follow on Twitter?
Yes.
At Jay Bretzman. And at Dr. T, what is it? Terry. Oh, you. Okay. You know, I try not to do that because, and not because I'm afraid of offending anybody, although I probably should be, but because it's a personalized list that you should create, right? So, you know, I could give you a couple of people, like if you like if you like the internet to be organized, and thank you for following me, I just heard that. If you like the internet to be organized, the Cybrary Man, he's, you know, an interesting guy. Now you put me on the spot. I can't think of his name. Yen, the guy who shows up on every Twitter chat ever made. What? I'll think of it in a minute. But what I want you to do is, oh boy. So now I'm searching. What I want you.
Because you named the people I told them to follow. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I told them Cybrary Man. We looked at Twitter chats earlier today and looked. They're required to do at least one Twitter chat. The Ookla Ed Twitter chat is actually the most active state chat in the country. There's a researcher just did a project on that. So I'm encouraging them to do Ookla Ed, but I also showed them on Cybrary Man where he has the list and can decide by time zone which one you want to do. So.
Yeah, and so what I recommend is you go to that Twitter chat and just follow and lurk and learn for a little bit, and you know, see how people say what they say, and then if there's somebody that you keep, you know, liking what they say, and you say, oh, this, you know, person shares interesting links and blogs and says really clever stuff, and this is the person I want to follow, you follow that person. But then I would suggest you go and look at who they follow, and, you know, not just follow everybody, but look at who they follow and see if any of those people are people that you would be interested in following. I think following people's followers is a good way to do it. And it's okay in the future to unfollow somebody, right? In the beginning, you might say, this is the person I need for whatever I'm doing. And then there might be somebody along the way who says it better or does it better, or you think, oh, this is good. I mean, you can still follow the other people, but now you're following new people. That's why I don't want to tell you who you should follow now, because it might be, well, it will be different for everybody, but it might be different for you, you know, a week from now or 6 months from now. It's not a very good answer, is it? You want a list?
I have a question. From a practical, actually, first of all, thank you for meeting with us today. Appreciate you chatting with us. From a practical standpoint, how do you implement a successful individualized PD at a school or district that suffers from a serious lack of resources, like a lot of public schools in our country do?
Oh boy, we got to give them more money, first of all, you know, because the people, you know, what you're doing is the most important work that can be done, and you're professionals, and we should treat you that way, and we should find the money. The money's there. Having said that, I think we can use the free tools that are out there, right? So we can, you know, again, you can, you know, show up at somebody's house and you can sit and talk. You can, you know, have some time after school to explore, all the things that are out there. You can have an happy hour, right? People are going to have cocktails. Let's talk about technology while we do that. Let's use the resources that are there. Most of the good stuff is free. Was it Richard Byrne does freetechforteachers.com, and he puts out blog after blog about these are the tools that you need to use for whatever the topic is. Are you asking more about what tools people can use, or are you asking about what could motivate people to do it?
Well, first of all, I wasn't referring just to like monetary resources, but as you mentioned in your book, how valuable a resource time is. And if, for example, if I need, if my individualized PD is much different than all the other teachers, how do you accommodate that? How does each teacher go to a 1 hour or however long individualized professional development? How do you fit all of that in? And the people facilitating the professional development, how much of their time does that take up then? If they need to move through every teacher in the school that has a separate plan, or needs a separate individualized plan, seems, I guess, a group one seems more efficient in terms of time. It might not satisfy everyone's needs, but in terms of just simply time, that seems the most efficient way.
And you're absolutely right. It is the most efficient way, right? And and not to be too flippant about it, but I tell my students that authoritarian regimes and dictators is the most efficient form of government, but it doesn't make it the best way to do it, right? So yeah, we can sit everybody in a room and we can set the standard, and here's our learning target, and we can say this is our benchmark, and we can deliver the heck out of it. We could broadcast it to everybody, but I think the point of personalized PD is that it doesn't matter if we do that, because not everybody's going to get it anyway. Yes, they sat in the seat. Yes, they checked the box. Yes, they maybe heard, maybe didn't because they weren't listening. But we can't claim any type of progress. We can't claim any type of movement. We can claim what we did, but we can't claim what the results are. And what we want is results to energize and inspire and empower teachers so that that can show up in their classrooms. And so, it may be uncomfortable for people to do. It's a whole lot easier to sit in the comfy chairs and watch a presentation that, I'm never going to use this stuff anyway, so I will smile and nod my head. But, I'm grading papers and I'm sending emails and I'm thinking about what I get from the grocery store. But we don't want that. So, yeah, it's going to be more uncomfortable. We're going to have to spend a little time. We should be spending a little bit of money. But mostly we've got to do what we need to do for those individuals. And at some level, maybe we don't have to do more or spend more. We've just got to pay attention, right? So we can ask the questions and we can form the groups. Sometimes we're going to need those instructional coaches, right? For those people who are far beyond, we need to get something for them too. And that's what we might need the instructional coach for, right? Or we might need, somebody from outside the building. We might need an email or, a Google Hangout like this to say, okay, so here's how you create the Google form. Here's how you add Flubrew as an add-on. Here's how you grade your students' work. And here's how you created the auto grade so you never have to touch it again. Students take your quiz, it's auto graded, and you've set it up, right? Maybe that's something for somebody who's already using Google Apps, but they need something more. And then there's the other people. We got to get get them what they need too. And maybe that's the person who's already created the Google form who's going to help somebody else. So my point is that it should be individualized, And eventually we can personalize it where we're going and finding the stuff that we need. It's not as efficient, but we should be doing it anyway.
I also had another quick question and maybe another path because I keep moving over here. I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about, for the teachers and the districts that you've seen this work very successfully, and obviously in your own school, how have you seen the teachers actually implement that, or have they in their own classrooms, whether they're flipping or doing part of that, or in what areas have you seen that bridge been made? Because they're obviously experiencing it themselves and hopefully positively.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, what that looks like. Are they really able to make that bridge, or is that a slow process?
Well, both, yes and yes, right? We're not talking about turning the speedboat. We're talking about taking the ocean liner and slowly, laboriously changing it into a different direction. It's a long process. But even going back to that, to his previous question, it can be, like a play date. So I've seen it where the instructional coach has created over the course of a month. We know this day, this PD day is coming up in a month. So over the course of a month, she's talked to people and found out what they want and what they need. But she's also said, hey, what would be really helpful for these people is to have this and this and this. And so she's created short tutorials. It could be video tutorials. It could be, clicking on links to go somewhere else. And so those are placed around the building. And so on that PD day, she doesn't have to be everywhere, right? And so that's a good way to do it. So she doesn't have to be everywhere because she's already created these things, and the teachers show up. And if they show up at the We Video room and they look at it and they go click, click, click. Oh, I got it. I know how to use We Video. I can make a video for my students now. Cool. And if it takes 10 minutes and they've got 3 hours, then they can go on to the next one and go find something else for themselves. So it doesn't become this, big, hefty lift for one person because they've, created it ahead of time. So that's almost like a play date, and then people will help each other, and they'll get something out of it for themselves. It's almost like an ed camp because you're voting with your feet. You're saying, I looked at this one for a couple minutes, but this isn't what I need. I'm going to go somewhere else. And then you might have some people who stay for an hour and really dig down and create a lesson with whatever they're using. So those are options too. Individualized learning plans. So this is something where you can simply, again, going back to our previous question, you simply make a Google Doc, or you can do it in whatever form you're using. And it's something that says, very simply, these are the things I want to learn. And you can set a time frame. You can use SMART goals if you want to, but you set a time frame saying, these are the things I want to do in my classroom. This is the big conceptual, whether it's project-based learning or flipped class or, bigger than that, if it's literacy or whatever the big idea is. And then you say, these are the things I think I need to learn about in order to get there. And then you sort of just document. Maybe you have artifacts, but maybe you document, this is what I learned along the way. And you can get that, excuse me, by Googling it, by asking somebody else who's already doing it, by connecting with people in your PLN, asking the administrator. We should always be asking the administrators, hey, what do you know about this? Maybe you can go to a conference with me. Oh, you got money in your budget for that? Great, let's go together. Stay overnight. So my point is, then now you've got this document it's free, it's easy, it doesn't take a lot of time, and then you just document and keep it up to date. And maybe again, if you're a Google Apps for Education school, you can put all that into a folder that's shared with everybody, and now everybody else can go and look. They can search in the folder. You type in flip class or type in video making or type in PBL or whatever it is, and see who else is working on that. Send them an email and say, hey, I noticed that you're working on, whatever the topic is. can we sit down for 20 minutes and talk about what you're doing? Because I really need help with, whatever. So there are options. There are, whatever you can conceive of, there's a way to get it done. Barbara, does that answer your question?
It does. I was just a little curious of the bridge to teachers doing that in their own classroom and using that constructivist type of thinking and building on critical thinking with that type of procedure. If you see a lot of the carryover into the teacher's classroom once they realize that they've benefited from that. Are you seeing a lot of that?
Yeah, I think we see a lot of it, and more as people get on Twitter and use Voxer, because they're not only learning more and getting excited about the stuff that I learned this weekend or the stuff that I learned last night in this chat. Now I want to go and implement it and try it and see what happens. But they're also, I think, modeling for their students this growth mindset. Well, what do you mean that you were learning last night? What do you mean why are you on Twitter? You're a teacher, Well, because that's where I meet people and hang out and talk about education. Wait, you use Twitter for educate, That's what my students say in the beginning. And then, yeah, and then, you did also, hit another nail on the head. Is it takes time, right? I mean, just think about where your Twitter followers are now. As you grow to 100 and 500 and 1,000 and so on and so forth, as you grow that PLN, so does your knowledge of what's going on out there. And that takes time. Growing those followers takes time. Growing that mindset takes time. But it's something that'll keep showing up, I think, more and more in your classroom, and it'll catch on, with the teachers and hopefully with the students, and they'll get connected too. When I first started doing Twitter trainings and connected educator trainings, there's a handful of people that came because they knew me, and they're like, yeah, I'll go to that and we'll talk about it. And we did it in the last 2 weeks. We had over 25 people, right? 30 people show up from 2 or 3 who used to come to now. We did it over 3 days, and there's 30 people that are coming from a staff of 100. It takes time.
All right, so it's kind of like a general, and it might be too broad, but anything that you've seen in like your fireside chats and things for personalized PD, like actually implemented in a flipped classroom, that's like every classroom should be doing this, like, or like a technology that not all classrooms might be using, but would just severely benefit them. Like something that's kind of like.
Your question is kind of, I couldn't hear exactly the middle of it. Are you asking, is there something that everybody should be doing?
Well, like that you've learned from personal PD, so the people that you, like the educators that you work with, that everybody across the board is like, this is what all classrooms should be doing to flip their classroom. Is there kind of like one general thing that this is so important to do, like an app or, something like that?
I think the most important thing for a flipped classroom is what you do in the face-to-face time, right? So you could have really bad videos or whatever else happens before that, but what you do when you, the expert, the professional educator, are there with the students, and when the students are there together, that is the absolute most important thing. And one of the big things that students should be doing, I think, so this is like a second thing, is building relationships with you, the teacher, with each other as students, and with the content. And then the third thing I would say in the flipped class, in the group space, is what type of higher level thinking are we doing? Are we analyzing things? Are we applying things? Are we creating things and sharing the things that we create with the world? I want my students to be not just consumers of content, but I want them to be creators of content, because they have something to offer. We all have something to offer, and maybe the way we say it can be shared with somebody else and they've never heard it said that way. They've never heard that story or that example. And my students, our students, all of our students are great enough where they can, share what they know and say it their own way, and that can, enlighten, inspire, and educate somebody. So that's what they should be doing. And let me add to that, just on another note, I don't think that there's, anything overall that we need to be doing in our classrooms in terms of an app or a program or, something like that. I think that, again, to honor professionals, I trust you to go and find what you need for your students. And you wouldn't be in that classroom. They wouldn't have hired you. They wouldn't have kept you if you didn't know what you were doing. We got to give you the ability to go and do it more and not, fit you into a box that doesn't fit. To not, pile data on top of you and bog you down with stuff that may not be what's best for your students because somebody somewhere wrote a book about it and said, you have to do this. You decide. You're smart. I trust you. But I tell you what, can I say one more thing on that? Having said all that, I'll just blow that out of the water. Every time we have Fireside PD, we talk about gamification. I don't know why, but every time it happens, we start talking about being connected and whatever else, and this tool and that tool and this concept, and we always come around to tell me more about gamification. Michael Matera, you should check out his book.
So let me ask, since there's about a little more than half of these students who are they're pre-service teachers. They already have a degree, but they're getting their master's degree. Are you involved in hiring at all at your school? Do you ever do interviews or anything with that?
Yeah, I've been on committees. I wouldn't say I'm involved in hiring. They wouldn't let me do that.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is for those who are not yet teachers, what kinds of things would make them a better candidate for the job they want related to personalized PD?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I tell you what, when I'm on the panel with most recently on hiring assistant principals and principals, I look at their resume and I look for, do you have an email address? Do you have a Twitter handle? And maybe I go too far, but I look, do you have a visual resume too? And like, is there like some kind of, picture thing that we can see of work that you've done and places you've been? But I remember one candidate, she had her home phone number on her resume. I'm like, you don't even have an email address. How are we going to talk about you leading our school in the 21st century if you don't have an email address? I mean, it's free. Make a Gmail. Throw it on there. I think you've got to have an answer to the question or to the questions about technology and professional learning networks, because it should come up if it doesn't, and you should bring it up if it doesn't. So it's, our school district is thinking about going to Google Apps for Education. How have you or how would you implement Google Apps for Education in your classroom? That's a legitimate question, right? And so we're getting Chromebooks next year. What would you do? So you want to make sure that you can talk about, you're not just going to use this Chromebook as a typewriter. You're going to use this Chromebook to transform education. And if they can Google it, then we shouldn't be talking about it. They should find the information, and then we could apply it. We could create with it. We could share with it. We could get connected with it. So you want to be able to have an answer. You could talk about it. I don't know if you'll get to, or maybe you already have talked about SAMR and the other models. The idea being that we don't want to do technology just to replace something else. We want to do something that we couldn't do without it and use the technology for that. And there's a whole, up and down that continuum. But again, what have you done? What would you do with Google Apps for Education? You want to be able to talk about a collaborative work with Google Docs where students are all working on the same document. You want to be able to talk about collecting information, right? Collecting and communicating with parents and with students. I want to know about my students. You could say, so I send them a form asking about them. Do they have internet access at home? Do they bring a device to school? And the reason I asked them, you would say, the reason I ask them about a device, do they have a device that can receive texts, is because I want to set up a Remind 101 account with them where I'm texting them reminders and links and blog posts or whatever, to, Quizlet answers and whatever. Storifies of a good Twitter chat. So, that stuff you want to just say, oh, and by the way, I, of course, use all these tech tools. You want to be able to talk about it in terms of what you know about it and what you would do with it to really enhance the experience of those students. Sorry, was that too much?
No, we're all good. We're all good. I know that you said, though, you only had about 45 minutes, and so I think we've probably used enough of your time. And I think, though, that this has been great. Actually, I have to say that, I'm going to call this Google Hangout as Dr. Cullen's validation Google Hangout. Sometimes when you're a professor and you're not in a K-12 school, people are like, oh, do you really have the street cred to be talking about what people are doing in schools? And they have a Remind. That's how I communicate with them. They're required to do Twitter chat. We just did today's meet as a practice Twitter chat so that they could see how you could do a Twitter chat with children under the age of 13. And we talked about how we can use this. We also kind of did a play date, not in the formalized sense, but we started class. We had one table with the Bloxels Builder. We had one table with Osmo, one with Ozobots, and one with Tigly. And we each discovered, I basically said, your principal went to a conference and a salesman talked him into buying a bunch of stuff and it shows up on your desk. Figure out how to use it as a group and how we can use it better, and that's a very realistic explanation of what goes on. So you have definitely validated what we've already done today, and so thank you very much. I appreciate you for that. And I also just want to point out,
and we didn't plan that ahead of time.
No. And I do just want to point out too. Here's kind of the deal too, is for you to realize how I picked the book. So I picked the book because I'm in Twitter chats. And I was looking for a book that looked at personalized PD that wasn't overly, it talks about flipping, but flipping was a part of it because that's kind of where things are going. I was looking for something, and you have this assignment that we've done for years where you have to make your own personal professional development plan, which we're not going to talk about today, but it will be part of the course, and that's how we finish the course. And so I was looking for something that fit in with that, and I saw, now I will say that Twitter has become the place for independent authors to self-promote, which is A-okay, no issue with that. But that's how I identified him. He was in a Twitter chat. He was talking about what his book was about. And I'm like, hey, that sounds really interesting. And the funny thing is I had already downloaded the book on my Kindle. I just didn't realize it. So I went to download it, and Kindle was like, hey, Terry, I think you already have this book. And I'm like, okay, so that's a sign to me. I've downloaded this book multiple times. People are talking about it. So this is a book that I should be reading. And so that's kind of how the book got chosen. And I reached out and said, hey, would you be willing to talk with the students? And that's what we're talking about, the PLN. So in theory, we've never met each other, but in theory, we are in the same PLN because we're crossing paths, the people that we connect with, the people that we know. And so that's helping me to know what's going on in K-12 schools, but it's also helping us to connect with, because his general target is not going to connect with people who aren't teachers yet. And so by me participating in the PLN, I'm able to share my PLN with all of you. And that's really the beauty of having a wide PLN, a professional learning network, I should say the terms again, so he clicks. Anyway, let's thank him. Let's thank John for coming. And we appreciate you being able to visit Oklahoma today. And what town are you in again?
I am in New Berlin, Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We had this whole conversation because I'm originally from Kenosha. And so there comes my Wisconsin comes out a little bit there. And the other thing is I do just want to point out before we stop is that when he talks about PLN, he doesn't want to recommend people. But one of the things that he's done a lovely job of in his book, and he has a couple really good people like Kristen Zemke, Oh, the woman that's now EW Parkside. I'm blanking on her name. She's a ADE. She's a co-author of the chapter with Kristen. Sue Gorman.
Sue Gorman?
Yeah, Sue Gorman. What I was going to say is at the end of each chapter, he has their people's Twitter handles in there. So if you read a particular chapter and you're saying, yeah, I really like what they're saying, then start following them on Twitter. The part of why I chose this book is I knew that the people that wrote the chapters were active Twitterers. And so I knew that they would link in good with other things we were doing. So anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Let me just echo that real quickly. You know, you want to be able to answer that question from the from the interview panel about the professional learning network that you have and the people that you've connected with and that you know and the things you've learned from them. That's a great answer to to a question about how do you learn or how do you find resources, something like that. But it's also just plain old powerful for you as a professional and as a person. I've struck great relationships with people where I've never met them before in person, and we show up at the same conference together, and we hug and we say it's so great to see you in person. And you're right that the authors, they tweet, and some of the authors I still haven't met in person. We've only known each other on Twitter, but based on what I've seen them write and share, that I knew that they would be willing to and a great addition to the books that we write. So we always try to model and show that connectedness by the people that we include in the books. So thanks again for letting me be here. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you, and I wish you well in your journey, and let's keep learning together. Let's stay connected. You sat here with me for about an hour, and I tell you, you get me for life. So show up anytime. Doors always open.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.